When Everybody Loves Raymond first aired in 1996, America fell in love. Behind the laughter, Patricia Heaton was hiding more than anyone guessed. Patricia Heaton, who played Deborah Barone, the sharp-tongued, exhausted wife, was living a double life that few on set ever suspected. While audiences laughed at Deborah's frustration, Heaton was quietly fighting exhaustion, pregnancy, and a storm of emotions that she had to bury deep to keep the show alive. Everybody Loves Raymond wasn't just another sitcom. It was built out of real tension, real marriages, and real exhaustion. Ray Romano, who played the lovable but clueless Raymond, wasn't only the star. He co-created the show with Phil Rosenthal, a writer who drew inspiration from the chaos of his own home life. Together, they turned personal conflicts into comedy gold. Every episode began as something raw and ordinary: a disagreement with a spouse, a parenting failure, an argument with parents, and was rewritten, refined, and rehearsed until it became television magic. But the truth behind those rehearsals wasn't always funny. The process was grueling. Mondays were script readings, Tuesdays and Wednesdays were blocking and table rehearsals, Thursdays were for camera runs, Fridays, the day of truth, were for filming in front of a live audience. During those early seasons, Patricia Heaton was living through what she would later call the most exhausting period of my life. She was pregnant, twice, and forced to keep both pregnancies completely secret because Deborah, her on-screen character, wasn't written to be expecting a baby. For months at a time, the production team used every trick in the book to hide her growing belly. They placed her behind kitchen counters, large laundry baskets, grocery bags, and even oversized handbags. Her wardrobe changed from fitted jeans to loose blouses and layered sweaters. The camera crew had to adjust their angles in every scene, careful not to reveal what the writers had never planned. Her co-stars would later admit they had little idea how much she was hiding. Ray Romano said years later, "She carried that show, and she carried life at the same time." We didn't always see how heavy it was. The truth was that Everybody Loves Raymond depended on her more than anyone realized. Without Heaton's balance, her warmth and bite, her humor and pain, the family dynamic that made the show special would have fallen apart. Yet that balance came at a cost. Heaton worked long hours while enduring morning sickness and physical pain, afraid any sign of weakness could jeopardize her role or the carefully maintained rhythm of the show. In interviews, she later recalled moments during rehearsals when she had to bite her lip to keep from crying, not from emotion but from pure exhaustion. Still, she smiled, delivered the line, and made America laugh. The show went on to become one of CBS's biggest hits, but few fans ever realized that some of its most heartfelt scenes, Deborah snapping at Raymond or falling silent after a family fight, weren't just performances. They were drawn from Heaton's real fatigue, her real struggles, quietly mirrored through comedy. Before she became America's favorite TV mom, Patricia Heaton was just another struggling actress in Los Angeles, trying to make rent and raise her kids. She had spent years bouncing between small roles, a nurse here, a waitress there, and wondering if Hollywood had already passed her by. She was older than most of the women auditioning, and she carried a realness, a sharpness, that didn't fit the glossy sitcom mold of the time. When Everybody Loves Raymond began casting, CBS executives initially had their eyes on another actress, Maggie Wheeler, who had just made her mark as Janice on Friends. Wheeler was funny, recognizable, and already loved by audiences. But during auditions, Phil Rosenthal noticed something different about Heaton. There was a grounded intensity in the way she read her lines, a blend of irritation, love, and weariness that felt too real to be acted. She didn't just play a wife tired of her husband's nonsense. She was that wife, shaped by years of balancing motherhood and an unpredictable career. She walked onto that set not as a rising star, but as a woman grateful to have one more shot. "I wasn't looking for fame," she later said. "I was just hoping to pay the bills and do the work." yet her performance would soon anchor one of the most successful sitcoms in television history. As Everybody Loves Raymond climbed in ratings, Heaton's life changed overnight. By 1999, she earned her first Emmy nomination, and by 2000, she had won. A moment she later described as surreal, like watching someone else's dream come true. But with fame came something darker. She never hid her faith or her opinions, and that made some of her colleagues uneasy. On set, debates occasionally flared, sometimes even with Peter Boyle, who played her father-in-law, Frank. Yet despite their differences, Boyle deeply respected her. When he died in 2006, Heaton broke down in tears during a public tribute, calling him a force of truth in a business that often forgets what truth looks like. At the center of it all was money, the invisible force that had begun to erode what had once been genuine camaraderie. Ray Romano, who not only starred as the title character but also co-created the show, was now the face and the brand of Everybody Loves Raymond. By 2003, he was earning roughly $1.8 million per episode, making him the highest-paid actor on television. To the outside world, it looked like well-deserved success. Inside the studio, though, that number felt like a slap in the face to the rest of the cast. Brad Garrett, who played Robert Barone, Raymond's awkward, underappreciated brother, was earning just $160,000 per episode, less than a tenth of Romano's salary. Garrett's contribution to the show was undeniable. He had given Robert a wounded humor that balanced Raymond's smugness and made the family dynamic believable. Fans adored him, critics praised him, and yet financially, he was treated like an afterthought. He tried to keep it to himself for a while. But resentment has a way of leaking through even the strongest smiles. During table reads, tension began to hum in the air. There were moments when Garrett's jokes fell flat, not because they weren't funny, but because the laughter felt forced. Patricia Heaton noticed it immediately. She'd always been sensitive to shifts in energy, the subtle ways a group starts to fracture. Eventually, Garrett couldn't hold it in. One day, he simply didn't show up. No explanations, no public statement, just silence. When word spread that he was refusing to return until the pay dispute was addressed, the network panicked. CBS executives scrambled behind closed doors. The media began to speculate. Heaton privately supported Garrett. She knew what it was like to be undervalued, to work tirelessly while someone else reaped the credit. But she also feared what the fallout might do to the crew, to the makeup artists, camera operators, and assistants whose jobs depended on the show continuing. It was like being stuck between loyalty and survival, she later said. You understood both sides and both hurt. The standoff dragged on for weeks. Negotiations grew tense. Phil Rosenthal, who had built the show around family unity, now watched it tear itself apart. Finally, CBS relented, offering the supporting cast a significant pay increase, not equal to Romano, but enough to restore a fragile peace. The cameras rolled again. But something had changed. From that point forward, something intangible had shifted. The atmosphere on set grew quieter, the jokes a little more rehearsed. The sense of family that had once defined Everybody Loves Raymond began to fade into professionalism. Rosenthal later admitted that by the 9th season, both he and the writing staff were emotionally drained. We were running on fumes, he said. You can only mine your real life for so long before it stops being funny. For Patricia Heaton, the tension took an emotional toll. She was a mother of 4 by then, balancing exhaustion at home with exhaustion at work. Yet she kept showing up, determined to end the series with dignity. During one of the final rehearsals for the show's last episode, something broke inside her. Mid-scene, as she delivered one of Deborah's lines about feeling taken for granted, her voice cracked. Then she started to cry, not as Deborah, but as Patricia. The room fell silent. Ray Romano stopped speaking. The cameras were lowered. For several long minutes, no one moved. It wasn't just the end of a sitcom, it was the end of an era. 9 years of laughter, tension, and unspoken struggles were finally catching up to them all. When the final episode aired in 2005, audiences saw closure. What they didn't see were the tears, the quiet goodbyes, and the exhaustion that came with letting go. Everybody Loves Raymond had made millions laugh, but for the people who created it, the laughter had become a kind of armor, something to hide behind while real life quietly took its toll. While audiences were laughing at Deborah Barone's frustration on screen, Patricia Heaton was living through something far more complicated off it. During the show's 9-year run, Heaton became pregnant twice, and both times the pregnancies were kept completely secret from the public, the studio executives, and even many of her own colleagues until much later. In Hollywood, pregnancy often meant risk of being written out, replaced, or sidelined. Everybody Loves Raymond was built around a consistent family dynamic. Deborah wasn't supposed to be pregnant, and no one wanted to rewrite the rhythm of the show. So the production team did something extraordinary. They decided to hide the truth in plain sight. From the outside, nothing looked different. The Barone kitchen remained bright and familiar. The living room still buzzed with laughter. But behind that easy domesticity, an intricate choreography was at work. Every scene had to be adjusted. The blocking, the props, even the way Heaton stood. If you look closely at the later seasons, you can spot the tricks. Deborah standing behind kitchen counters, holding laundry baskets, carrying oversized handbags, folding piles of clothes, or leaning against a refrigerator just long enough to obscure her silhouette. Camera operators tilted their frames just slightly higher, cutting the shots mid-torso. What looked like simple sitcom staging was, in truth, a masterclass in concealment. None of it would have worked without Heaton's professionalism. Morning sickness, fatigue, and the hormonal fog of pregnancy hit her daily, but she never missed a beat. Her timing remained sharp, her expressions precise. Still, there were moments when the facade nearly cracked. During long rehearsals under hot studio lights, Heaton would quietly step off set to rest or drink water, then return as if nothing had happened. Her co-stars didn't always understand what she was enduring, and she preferred it that way. "If I let them worry, it would change the energy," she explained years later. "The audience needed Deborah, not me, not my struggles." And that's what makes it remarkable. The audience never noticed. For 2 entire pregnancies, through months of filming and hundreds of scenes, no one outside the production team suspected a thing. There were no rumors, no awkward script changes, no tabloid headlines. It was one of television's best-kept secrets. Looking back, the irony is almost poetic. Deborah Barone, the character, was always portrayed as the overworked mother, stretched too thin, holding her family together through sheer will. And behind that illusion, Patricia Heaton was living the same reality, multiplied by the pressures of fame, secrecy, and perfection. Her exhaustion, her sharp tone, her emotional authenticity, all of it came from a place that was real. Phil Rosenthal later said that those years taught him something profound about Heaton's strength. "Patricia didn't just play the mom," he said. "She carried us all. She carried her family at home, and she carried this family on set. She never asked for sympathy. She just showed up every single day." The hidden pregnancies became a symbol of the show's duality. The comedy that masked the struggle. The perfection that came from imperfection. When Heaton later reflected on that time, she didn't describe it as glamorous or heroic. She simply called it necessary. "When you love what you do," she said, "you find a way to keep doing it, even when it hurts." By the time Everybody Loves Raymond wrapped in 2005, Heaton's children were old enough to recognize her on television. For them, she wasn't just a star. She was mom, tired, determined, and still standing. For the rest of the world, she remained Deborah Barone, sharp, funny, endlessly patient. What no one realized was that every scene had been filmed by a woman who was literally carrying life while carrying a show on her back. Hen, Everybody Loves Raymond. Ended in 2005, Patricia Heaton stood at the top of television. 2 Emmys, millions of fans, and a reputation as America's moral compass on screen. But beneath that success, her life was about to shift in ways no one expected. In 2009, a quiet headline broke through the noise. Heaton was being sued by her former assistant over unpaid overtime, a mere $742. It wasn't scandalous or salacious, just strangely small. Yet it cracked something in the image the public had built around her, that of the flawless, steady matriarch who could do no wrong. Jennifer Lee, her assistant, claimed she'd worked long hours without proper pay. For Heaton, who had spent years advocating fairness and family values, the accusation hit harder than its dollar amount. Overnight, talk shows turned it into irony. Tabloids framed it as hypocrisy. The woman who'd once embodied integrity was now a punchline. Heaton said nothing. No interviews, no defenses. Her lawyers handled it quietly, and within weeks, the case was settled behind closed doors. No one knew what really happened, only that the story had left a mark. Not on her career, but on the illusion of perfection surrounding her. For years, audiences believed Patricia Heaton had mastered balance, motherhood, faith, and fame in equal measure. The lawsuit reminded everyone that image was just another role. To those who knew her, it was never about scandal. It was about being human. "She's not perfect," a co-star once said. "She's real." That's what made Deborah work, and that's what makes Patricia last. Within a year, Heaton was back, leading The Middle, playing Frankie Heck, a mother stretched thin and barely holding it together. If Deborah Barone was composed chaos, Frankie was what came after. Messy, broke, but still fighting. It was almost poetic. The cracks in Heaton's public image had become the very thing that made her characters more relatable. She later admitted the lawsuit taught her something about grace. "People want you to be an idea," she said, "but life doesn't work like that. You can love your family, love your work, and still fall short. That doesn't erase everything else." The world moved on, but inside, something in her had shifted. By 2020, after decades of playing strong women and living under constant eyes, Heaton faced a quieter reckoning, one that had nothing to do with headlines. That year, she posted a short video from her kitchen. No makeup, no script, no lighting, just a confession. She had been sober for 3 years. "It wasn't wild," she said softly. "I just realized one day that I didn't want to feel that fog anymore." Her admission surprised people, not because she'd hidden a scandal, but because she had hidden exhaustion, the kind that builds slowly, invisibly. After The Middle ended in 2018, she felt unanchored for the first time in decades. Without a set, a crew, or a character to hold on to, the silence became too loud. A glass of wine at night became too, then routine. "You tell yourself it's nothing," she said, "until one day, it owns your evenings." Her husband, David Hunt, asked her a simple question. "Are you still you when you drink?" That stayed with her. One night, without fanfare, she poured her last glass and stopped. No rehab, no headlines, just a decision. Sobriety wasn't peace at first. It was confrontation. The laughter she'd buried her stress under, the grief for her parents, the fatigue of keeping up an image, all of it resurfaced. "You start to feel everything again," she said. "And it hurts, but it's real." When she finally spoke about it publicly, it wasn't for applause. She wanted honesty. "People saw Deborah and thought I had everything together," she said. "But I was just like her, holding it all up, terrified of letting it fall." She began using one word to define her new life: awake. awake to faith, to flaws, to the beauty of imperfection. Looking back, Heaton's journey wasn't a fall from grace. It was a quiet redemption. From pretending, from silence, from the need to seem perfect. From hiding pregnancies to finding clarity, every stage carried a private strength the cameras never showed. By the time the middle had ended and her sobriety began, audiences didn't just see Deborah Barone anymore. They saw Patricia Heaton, still smiling, but softer, wiser, awake.